I spent nearly 2 hours getting ready, which felt excessive even to me. At 64, I had learned that effort didn't guarantee admiration, but it did give me a sense of control. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the soft cream blouse I'd bought months ago and never worn. It still had the faint scent of lavender from my closet. Not too much, I muttered to myself, dabbing away a bit of lipstick. Just enough. Tonight mattered. My daughter Claire had insisted I come. Her husband Daniel had just secured a major promotion at his firm, and they were hosting a celebratory dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, one of those places where menus didn't list prices and the waiters spoke in low, rehearsed tones. It's important to him, Claire had said over the phone. And to me. She didn't say it, but I heard the rest anyway. So please behave. Please don't embarrass us. I arrived 10 minutes early, as I always did. Old habits. The restaurant glowed with warm amber lighting, polished glass, and quiet wealth. I paused at the entrance, smoothing my blouse again, then gave my name to the hostess. Yes, she said, scanning her list. They're expecting you. That word, expecting, felt heavier than it should have. The private dining room was already half full when I walked in. Laughter floated through the air, mingling with the clink of glasses. Claire spotted me first. "Mom," she said brightly, crossing the room. She kissed my cheek quickly, already glancing past me. "You made it." "Of course I did," I said with a smile. "I wouldn't miss this." She stepped back, giving me a quick once-over. "You look nice." Nice. Not beautiful. Not elegant. Just acceptable. Daniel approached then, his arm already draped casually over Claire's shoulder. His smile was wide, practiced. "Emily," he said, extending a hand instead of a hug. "Glad you could join us." "I wouldn't miss it," I repeated. "Good, good," he said, already turning slightly toward another guest. "Make yourself comfortable. Drinks are being served." I nodded, stepping aside as someone more important claimed his attention. I found a seat near the end of the table. It gave me a good view of the room, and of them. Claire moved effortlessly among the guests, laughing at just the right moments. Daniel commanded attention without even trying. They looked like success. And I suppose I looked like an afterthought. As I sat there, I couldn't help thinking about the past 3 years. The checks, the quiet transfers, the temporary help. "Just until we get settled," Claire had said back then. "It's just a rough patch, Mom. We'll handle things after Daniel's promotion." That promotion had finally arrived, and I had kept my promise. Every month, without fail. No one here knew. Claire had been very clear about that. It would make him uncomfortable, she'd said. He's proud. So I kept quiet, even when my savings began to shrink faster than I'd planned, even when I started cutting back on things for myself, even when I lay awake some nights wondering how long I could keep it up. Because that's what mothers do, right? They give. The room gradually filled, and the dinner began. Plates arrived in careful courses, each more elaborate than the last. Conversations overlapped, laughter rising and falling like waves. I spoke when spoken to, smiled when expected, watched everything. At some point, Daniel stood up. He tapped his glass lightly, and the room quieted almost instantly. "I just want to say a few words," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "Tonight means a lot to me." "Of course it does," I thought. He continued, thanking colleagues, mentors, the company, each name delivered with precision. The room responded with nods, murmurs, approval. Then he turned toward Claire. "And, of course, none of this would have been possible without my incredible wife." Claire beamed. "She's been my support through everything," he went on. "Late nights, stress, uncertainty, she's always believed in me." Applause followed. I clapped too. because I did believe in him. I always had. Then his eyes moved slowly down the table and landed on me. And Emily, he said. My name felt strange in his mouth. A few heads turned. I straightened slightly, unsure. She's here tonight as well, he continued, a hint of amusement in his voice. Always good to see family show up for the important moments. A pause. Then, with a small chuckle, I guess even the best restaurants have their regulars. There was laughter. Soft at first, then louder. Not cruel enough to be called out, but not kind either. I felt it immediately, that subtle shift in the room, the understanding beneath the joke. Not honored guest, not family support, just someone who shows up for the perks, for the meal, for the experience. I kept smiling, because what else could I do? Claire laughed too. Quickly. A little too quickly. Her eyes flicked toward me for just a second, checking, measuring, making sure I wouldn't make this awkward. I nodded slightly. It was enough. Daniel continued speaking, moving on as if nothing had happened. But I didn't hear the rest. Something inside me had gone very quiet. Not broken. Not yet. Just still. When the speech ended, conversations resumed as if nothing had happened. I sat there for a few more minutes. Then I picked up my purse. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. Outside, the night air felt cooler than I expected. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Then I walked to the curb and called a cab. The ride home was silent. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur together. And for the first time in a very long while, I thought about myself. Not Claire, not Daniel, not their needs. Mine. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet. It felt unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Eventually, I went to the kitchen. My checkbook was exactly where I'd left it. The next payment was due in 3 days. I opened it, looked at the blank check, and for the first time, I didn't reach for a pen. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was upset in the way I used to be. No tears, no pacing, no replaying every word over and over again, but because something inside me had shifted and my mind refused to ignore it. It was like a quiet voice I had spent years silencing had finally decided it was done waiting. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking not about Daniel's joke itself, but about everything it represented. The years of subtle dismissals. The way Claire would interrupt me mid-sentence. The way Daniel always spoke to me like I was slightly out of touch, slightly inconvenient, slightly less. And underneath all of that, the money. Always the money. Not discussed openly, not acknowledged, but always present, like an invisible thread tying me to them. By morning, I felt strangely calm. Not angry, not even hurt, not in the usual way. Just clear. I made myself coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my checkbook again. The same blank check stared back at me. 3 days until the mortgage payment was due. 3 years of payments behind it. 36 checks. I didn't need a calculator to know what that meant, but I reached for my phone anyway and did the math. The number made me pause, not because I didn't expect it, but because seeing it all at once felt different than living it piece by piece. Month by month, it had felt manageable. Just a little help. Just temporary. But added together, it told a completely different story. I set the phone down slowly. That's enough, I said out loud, and hearing my own voice made it real. My hand didn't tremble when I picked up the pen this time. Instead of filling in the amount, I turned the check slightly and wrote one word across it in firm, deliberate letters. Void. I stared at it for a moment, letting the finality sink in. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Just a decision that should have been made a long time ago. I spent the rest of the morning doing small, ordinary things. Watering my plants, folding laundry, opening the windows to let in fresh air, but everything felt different, as if the world had shifted slightly into place. Around noon, my phone buzzed.
Claire.
I watched it ring for a few seconds before answering. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, my tone even. "What happened?" she snapped immediately.
No gritino, no pause.
Just accusation. The bank called. The payment didn't go through. I leaned back in my chair. "Good afternoon to you too, Claire." "Mom, this is serious," she said, her voice tight with irritation. "Daniel is already dealing with enough stress at work. We don't need this right now." I let a second pass before responding. "I canceled the check." Silence. Not long, but heavy. "You what?" she asked, slower now, as if I had spoken in another language. "I canceled it," I repeated calmly. "There won't be another one." Her breath caught. "Is this because of last night? Are you seriously doing this over a joke?" I looked out the window at the quiet street. "Was it a joke, Claire?" "Oh my God," she exhaled sharply. "You're being dramatic. That's just how Daniel is. He was trying to be funny." Everyone laughed. "Yes," I said softly. "They did." "Exactly," she continued, seizing on that. "So clearly it wasn't a big deal." I almost smiled at that. Or maybe it was. She ignored that completely. "You can't just stop like this. We have responsibilities, Mom. A mortgage doesn't just disappear because you feel offended. And my savings don't just replenish because you feel entitled," I replied. That stopped her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then her tone changed. Softer now. Careful. "Mom, come on.
We talked about this.
You said you wanted to help us." "I did help you," I said. "For 3 years. And we're grateful," she said quickly, though the words felt rehearsed. "But we're not there yet. Things are still stabilizing." "Are they?" I asked gently, because from what I saw last night, things look pretty stable. "That's not fair," she snapped. "You have no idea what our expenses are." "I have a very good idea," I said. "Better than you think." She huffed in frustration. "This is unbelievable. You're putting us in a terrible position right now." "No," I corrected her quietly. "I'm removing myself from one." "Same thing," she shot back. "It isn't," I said. Her patience snapped. "You're being selfish." The word hung in the air. For years, that word would have undone me, made me apologize, made me reach for my checkbook before the conversation even ended. But now, "No," I said, steady and calm. "I'm finally not being selfish to myself." She let out a disbelieving laugh.
Wow. So that's it?
"After everything we've done for you?" I blinked. "What exactly have you done for me, Claire?"
We include you, she said.
"We invite you to things. We check in on you." I let that settle between us. "And in return, I've given you tens of thousands of dollars." "That's different," she said quickly. "That's family support. So is respect," I replied. Another silence. Then, sharper now, more desperate. "You're overreacting. This is ridiculous. You're going to ruin our credit over this." "I'm not ruining anything," I said. "I'm just not paying for it anymore." "You can't just cut us off," she raised her voice. "I can," I said simply. Her breathing grew uneven. "Mom, please. Just this month. We'll figure something out after that." I closed my eyes for a second. That tone. That plea. I knew it too well. "No," I said. Her voice dropped cold now.
"Fine.
"Don't expect us to be there when you need help." I opened my eyes. I never expected that. That hit her. I could hear it in the way she inhaled sharply. "You're unbelievable," she said. "And you're used to getting your way," I replied. A long pause. Then, quietly, almost bitterly, "You've changed."
I thought about that.
Yes, I said. I have.
She didn't respond.
After a few seconds, the line went dead. I set the phone down gently and sat there for a while, letting the silence return. My heart was beating faster now, but not from fear, from something else. Something like relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next demand. I wasn't bracing for the next call. I wasn't calculating what I could afford to give. I stood up, walked to the sink, and rinsed my coffee cup. Outside, the afternoon sun had grown brighter. The same street, the same house, the same life, and yet everything felt different. Because for the first time in a long time, I had chosen myself. The silence didn't last as long as I expected. For 3 days, my phone stayed quiet, and I almost allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were processing things, adjusting, finding a way to move forward without me as their safety net. But deep down, I knew better. People don't give up something they've depended on so easily, especially not when they've convinced themselves it was always theirs to begin with. On the fourth day, the doorbell rang. I wasn't surprised to see my son, Ethan, standing on the porch. He looked exactly the same as always, slightly rumpled, thoughtful, carrying that familiar expression of someone who had been placed in the middle of something he didn't ask for. He gave me a small smile when I opened the door. "Hey, Mom," he said, leaning in to hug me. "Got a minute? For you?" "Always," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. We moved into the kitchen, and I automatically reached for the coffee pot. Some habits don't change, no matter what's happening around you. Ethan sat down at the table, tapping his fingers lightly against the surface, clearly choosing his words before speaking. "Claire called me," he said finally. "I figured she might," I answered, setting a mug in front of him. "She's not happy," he added carefully. "I imagine not." He hesitated, then looked up at me. "She said you cut them off because of something Daniel said at dinner." I met his gaze. "That's the simplified version." "I thought so," he nodded. "There's more, isn't there?" So I told him, not just about the dinner, but about everything leading up to it. The monthly payments, the extra emergencies that somehow always appeared at convenient times. The quiet expectation that I would always be there to fix whatever financial gap they created. As I spoke, Ethan's expression shifted from concern to disbelief, then slowly to something darker. "Wait," he interrupted at one point, sitting up straighter. "You've been paying their mortgage this whole time?" "Yes." "How much are we talking about?" "About $2,400 a month." He did the math quickly in his head. I could see it in his eyes. "Mom, that's—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't your burden to carry," I said gently. "And because Claire asked me not to." Ethan let out a long breath, leaning back in his chair. "She didn't mention any of that. She made it sound like you just helped out occasionally." "I'm sure she did." He rubbed his face, clearly trying to process it. "And Daniel knows about all of this?" "Yes," I said. "He knows." "And he still made that joke?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't have to. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not okay, Mom." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." For a moment, we just sat there in silence. Then he spoke again, more hesitant this time. "There's something else," he said. I felt a small knot form in my stomach. "What is it?" He looked down at his coffee, avoiding my eyes. "I've heard Daniel talk about you before. Not to your face. Just in conversations." I stayed very still. "What kind of conversations?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Just comments. Jokes, mostly." "What kind of jokes?" I asked quietly. He hesitated again, clearly debating whether to continue. Then he sighed. "He calls you reliable," he said, "but not in a good way. More like predictable. Like he knows you'll always step in." I nodded slowly. "I see." And sometimes, he continued, his voice lowering, he says things like you're too careful with money, that you act like you're struggling when you're actually doing fine. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Too careful. Yeah, Ethan said. Like you hold on to it unnecessarily. I let that sit for a moment. Then I asked, anything else? He didn't answer right away, which told me everything. Ethan, I said gently, I'd rather know the truth. He exhaled slowly. He's joked that having you around makes things easier, that it's like having a backup plan built into the family. A backup plan. I looked down at my hands, resting calmly on the table, not shaking, not trembling, just still. And Claire? I asked. Does she say anything when he talks like that? Ethan's silence was louder than any answer. I understand, I said softly. Before he could respond, there was another knock at the door. Sharp, impatient. Ethan and I exchanged a glance. I'll get it, I said. I already knew who it was. Claire stood on the porch, arms crossed, her posture rigid with frustration. She didn't wait for an invitation this time. The moment I opened the door, she stepped inside. We need to talk, she said. So I've been told, I replied calmly. She froze slightly when she saw Ethan in the kitchen. You're here too?
Yeah, he said.
I came to check on Mom. Claire rolled her eyes. Of course you did. She turned back to me, her expression sharp. What exactly are you trying to prove with all of this? I'm not trying to prove anything, I said. I'm just making a change. A change? She repeated incredulously. You call pulling financial support with no warning a change? Yes. She let out a short, humorless laugh. You've completely blindsided us. Have I? I asked. Or have you just gotten used to something that was never guaranteed? Her face tightened. We depended on that money. That was your first mistake. That's not fair, she snapped. You offered to help. I agreed to help temporarily. I corrected her. Temporary doesn't mean indefinite. We're not there yet, she insisted. You might never be, I said quietly. Not if you keep relying on me. That hit a nerve. So this is about control now, she fired back. You want to teach us a lesson? No, I said. Life will do that on its own. She stared at me, searching for something, weakness, hesitation, anything she could use. But she didn't find it. You've changed, she said again, more quietly this time. Yes, I replied. Ethan shifted in his seat. Claire, maybe you should listen.
Stay out of it, she snapped.
He raised his hands slightly, but didn't argue. Claire turned back to me. Do you even care what this does to us? I do, I said honestly. But I care about what it was doing to me more. She shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. I don't even recognize you right now. That makes two of us, I said softly. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Not anger, not frustration, something closer to uncertainty. But it vanished quickly. Fine, she said, her voice hardening again. If that's how you want it, don't expect things to just go back to normal. I'm not expecting that, I replied. She turned toward the door, then stopped. Daniel wants to talk to you, she added. Soon. I nodded. He can try. She left without another word. The door closed behind her with a sharp finality. Ethan looked at me, shaking his head slightly. This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it? Probably, I admitted. Are you okay? He asked. I thought about it. About the dinner. About the phone call. About everything I had just learned. Then I nodded. Yes, I said. I think I finally am. And for the first time, I truly meant it. The next step wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve raised voices or confrontations or carefully chosen words. It was quiet, almost ordinary, and yet it changed everything more than any argument ever could. 2 days after Claire's visit, I sat across from my financial advisor, Margaret, in her softly lit office, a folder of documents resting neatly in front of me. Margaret had known me for years. She'd helped me navigate my finances after my husband passed, guiding me through decisions I never thought I'd have to make alone. She wasn't easily surprised, but that day, I saw something close to it in her expression. "Emily," she said slowly, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the statements, "I need to ask you something directly. These recurring withdrawals, they've been going on for quite some time. Can you explain them to me?" I folded my hands in my lap. "I've been helping my daughter and her husband with their mortgage. And other expenses." Margaret looked back down at the documents, then up at me again. "Helping," she repeated carefully. "How long has this been happening?"
3 years, I said.
She nodded once, then turned her monitor slightly, so I could see. "Let's go through this together." I leaned forward. There it was, everything laid out in clean, unemotional rows.
Dates.
Amounts. Transfers.
No justificações, no contexto, no excuses. Just facts.
Month after month, the same number appeared like a heartbeat. $2,400. Beneath that, scattered but frequent, were additional withdrawals. $3,800. $5,200. $1,750. Each one tied to a reason I remembered all too well. Car trouble, medical bills, home repairs, urgencies that couldn't wait, emergencies that always seemed to arrive just in time to justify another check. Margaret tapped the screen lightly. "Do you recall all of these?" "Yes," I said quietly. "At least, I thought I did." She scrolled further. "Emily, when we combine the monthly support with these additional amounts, the total over the past 3 years is approximately $129,000. The number landed harder than I expected, even though I'd already begun to suspect it. 129,000, I repeated, as if saying it out loud might make it less real. Margaret leaned back slightly, studying my reaction. "Did you realize it had reached this level?" "No," I admitted. "Not all at once like this." "That's often how it happens," she said gently. "Individually, each decision feels manageable, reasonable even. But over time it accumulates." I stared at the screen, at the undeniable truth of it. There was no emotion in those numbers.
No manipulation. No reinterpretation.
Just reality. "What does this mean?" I asked finally. Margaret folded her hands. "It means that if this pattern had continued, your retirement savings would have been significantly impacted within the next decade. At your current rate of withdrawal, you could have depleted a substantial portion of your assets far earlier than planned." I felt a chill run through me. How much time would I have had? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Roughly 7 to 8 years before you would need to make serious lifestyle adjustments. Possibly sooner, depending on market conditions and unexpected expenses." 7 years. I was 64. The math was simple and terrifying. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair. For a moment, the room felt very quiet. "I stopped the payments," I said. Margaret nodded. "That was the right decision. I should have done it sooner." "Perhaps," she said, "but you're doing it now. That's what matters." I appreciated that she didn't lecture me. Didn't say "I told you so," even though she easily could have. Instead, she turned the conversation forward. "There are a few steps we should consider," she continued. "First, we stabilize your current financial position. Second, we put safeguards in place to prevent future pressure or unauthorized access. And third, We reassess your long-term plan to ensure you remain secure. Safeguards? I asked. Yes, she said. Legal and structural protections. For example, updating your will, establishing a trust, assigning power of attorney to someone you trust implicitly. I already knew who that would be. Not Claire, I said quietly. Margaret didn't react outwardly, but I saw the understanding in her eyes. That's your decision, she said. But given what you described, I would recommend choosing someone who has demonstrated financial responsibility and respect for your boundaries. Ethan, I said. That sounds appropriate, she replied. I nodded slowly. I never thought I'd have to think this way. About my own family. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Emily, this isn't about distrust. It's about protection. And sometimes, protecting yourself is the healthiest thing you can do for everyone involved. I let that settle. For years, I had framed everything as helping them,
Supporting them.
being there for them. I had never once asked whether I was protecting myself, because I hadn't been. After the meeting, I walked out into the afternoon sunlight, the folder tucked under my arm. The world looked exactly the same as it had that morning, cars passing, people walking, life continuing, but I felt different walking through it. Lighter in some ways, heavier in others. Aware. When I got home, I placed the folder on my kitchen table and sat down in front of it. For a long moment, I didn't open it. I just looked at it, knowing what was inside. Then I flipped it open. Page after page of numbers.
Proof.
Not of generosity, not of love, but of a pattern I had allowed, and one I had now ended. The doorbell rang just as I turned the last page. I didn't need to check to know who it was. This time, when I opened the door, Daniel stood there, alone. His expression was carefully composed, but there was something beneath it, something tighter, less controlled than usual. Emily, he said, we need to talk. I stepped aside.
Come in.
He walked into the living room, glancing around briefly as if assessing the space, then turned to face me. He didn't sit. I'll get straight to the point, he said. This situation has gone on long enough. I agree, I replied calmly. His eyes narrowed slightly, thrown off by my lack of resistance. Good. Then we're on the same page. I don't think we are, I said. He ignored that. You've created a serious problem for us. The missed payment has already triggered a warning from the bank.
I'm aware.
And you don't seem concerned about that? I'm not responsible for it. That landed harder than anything else I could have said. His jaw tightened. You were responsible for it. For 3 years. And now I'm not. He took a step closer. You can't just withdraw support like that. We've built our finances around a certain structure. I've seen your finances, I said, gesturing toward the folder. They're not structured. They're dependent. His expression darkened. That's a strong accusation. It's an accurate one. For a moment, the polite facade cracked. You're being unreasonable. No, I said. I'm being informed. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Look, let's be practical. We can adjust the amount if necessary. Something more manageable for you. I almost smiled. There it was again. Not if I would continue paying. Just how much? No, I said. He blinked.
No. No.
That's not how this works. It is now. Silence stretched between us. Then, quieter but colder. You're making a mistake. I met his gaze steadily.
No.
I've already made it. For 3 years. I'm just not continuing it. He studied me, searching for the version of me he was used to, the one who would bend, who would hesitate, who would apologize. But she wasn't there anymore. Finally, he straightened. This isn't over, he said. I know, I replied. He turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused, just slightly. You'll regret this, he added. Maybe once I would have believed that.
Now I didn't.
I don't think I will, I said. The door closed behind him, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The invitation came exactly 1 week later, which was just enough time for tension to settle into something quieter, more strategic. Claire called in the early evening, her tone noticeably different from before, softer, measured, almost careful, like someone approaching a situation they no longer fully controlled. Mom, she said, I think we should talk.
Properly.
Not like before. I stood by the kitchen counter, watching the last light of the day fade through the window.
We've talked, I replied.
Not like this, she insisted. Not calmly. Not constructively. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her choosing her next words. We'd like you to come over for dinner on Saturday, she continued. Just us.
No guests. No distractions.
I didn't answer immediately. The shift in tone was obvious, but it wasn't reassuring. If anything, it made me more alert. What's the purpose of this dinner?
I asked.
To fix things, she said quickly. To move forward. There it was again, forward. Not resolve, not understand, but forward, as if the past could simply be stepped over without being acknowledged. And Daniel? I asked. He agrees, she said. We both do. I leaned against the counter, considering it. Everything I had learned over the past weeks told me this wasn't a peace offering. It was a recalibration. Still,
I said yes.
All right, I said. I'll come. Her relief was immediate. Good. 7 o'clock. After we hung up, I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. I wasn't nervous, not like I would have been before. This time, I knew exactly what I was walking into. Saturday evening, I dressed simply. Dark slacks, a soft blue blouse, nothing that tried too hard. I brought a bottle of wine, not expensive, not symbolic, just appropriate. As I drove to their house, I noticed how different the journey felt. For years, I had arrived there with a quiet sense of obligation, readiness to give, to smooth, to support. Now I arrived with something else entirely. Awareness. Claire opened the door before I could knock, her smile wide, but not quite natural. Mom, you're here, she said, stepping forward to hug me. It felt rehearsed, like something she had practiced. You look well, she added.
Thank you, I said.
Daniel appeared behind her, his expression controlled, his tone polite. Emily, he said. Good to see you. I nodded. Daniel. The house looked exactly as I remembered. Immaculate, carefully arranged, every detail intentional. I noticed new furniture in the living room, subtle but unmistakable. I wondered, briefly, which emergency had funded it. Can I get you something to drink?
Claire asked.
Water's fine, I replied. We moved into the dining room, where the table was already set. Candles, neatly folded napkins, polished glassware. It would have been beautiful if not for the tension sitting just beneath the surface. Dinner began with small talk. Safe topics. Work, weather, distant relatives. Claire carried most of the conversation, filling the space with practiced ease. Daniel nodded at the right moments, adding just enough to appear engaged. I let it happen. I waited, because I knew this wasn't the real conversation. That came after the plates were cleared. Claire set down her fork, glanced at Daniel, then back at me. We've been thinking a lot, she began. I'm sure you have, I said calmly. We realized things got out of hand, she continued. There were misunderstandings, miscommunication. I didn't respond. Daniel leaned forward slightly. We want to reset, he said. Move forward in a way that works for everyone. There it is again, I said softly. Forward.
Claire blinked.
Yes, forward. What does that look like to you?
I asked.
They exchanged a quick glance. Then Daniel reached beside his chair and picked up a folder. I felt something inside me go very still. He placed it on the table and opened it, revealing neatly printed pages.
Charts?
Numbers. Calculations. We've taken the time to review everything, he said. Your finances, our situation, future projections. I stared at the papers. You review my finances?
I asked.
Based on what we know, he said smoothly. Public information, reasonable estimates. We wanted to be thorough. Claire leaned in, her voice softer. Mom, we're just trying to help you manage things better. I almost laughed. Instead, I folded my hands in front of me. Go on. Daniel tapped one of the pages. Given your current assets and expenses, it's clear that you can comfortably contribute a smaller, more sustainable amount on a monthly basis. How generous of you to determine that, I said. He ignored the tone. We're suggesting $2,000 per month. Less than before, but enough to stabilize things on our end without significantly impacting your lifestyle. The room fell silent. For a moment, I simply looked at him, then at Claire. They were both watching me, expectant, confident, certain, even, that this was a reasonable solution, a compromise, a continuation. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. They had never seen my support as temporary. They had seen it as theirs. No, I said. The word landed quietly, but firmly. Daniel blinked. I'm sorry.
No, Irapa.
Claire leaned forward. Mom, you haven't even looked at the numbers. I don't need to, I said. Please just consider. I have considered it. I interrupted gently. My answer is no. Daniel's expression hardened. That's not a discussion. That's a refusal. Yes, I said. It is. Claire's composure cracked. Mom, be reasonable.
We worked really hard on this.
I can see that, I said. But you worked on the wrong assumption. Which is? Daniel asked sharply. That I would continue funding your life. Silence. Then, colder now. After everything we've done for you?
Claire said.
I looked at her steadily. We've already had that conversation. Daniel pushed the folder slightly toward me. You're making an emotional decision. No, I said. I'm making an informed one. His jaw tightened. You're being stubborn. I'm being clear. Claire's voice wavered slightly. What about family? What about it? I asked. Family supports each other, she said. Yes, I agreed. They do. And this is how you support us? No, I said quietly. This is how I stop enabling you. That word hit. Enabling. Daniel repeated, his tone sharp. That's insulting. So was your speech, I replied. His eyes flickered. Claire looked between us, her frustration rising. We said we were sorry for that. No, I said calmly. You explained it. That's not the same thing. Another silence. Then Daniel leaned back, his patience clearly gone.
Let's be honest, he said.
You don't need that money the way we do. I felt something sedlakanchathilna inside me. Need is not the point, I said. Respect is.
He scoffed.
This isn't about respect. This is about control. No, I said. It's about boundaries. Claire stood abruptly. I can't believe this, she said. You're choosing money over your own family. I stood as well. No, I said. I'm choosing myself. That stopped her. For just a second. But it was enough. I will always be your mother. I continued, my voice steady. I will always care about you. But I will not continue this arrangement. Daniel stood too now, his expression dark. Then don't expect us to be there when you need something. I met his gaze. I don't. The words hung between us. Final. Claire's eyes filled with tears, real or not. I couldn't tell anymore. So that's it? She whispered. Yes, I said. I picked up my purse, moved toward the door, and paused only briefly. You're welcome to visit me, I added. As family, not as dependents. Neither of them responded. I stepped outside into the cool night air, closing the door gently behind me. And as I walked to my car, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel loss. I felt free. 6 months passed in a way that felt both slow and incredibly fast, as if time itself had shifted into a different rhythm once I stopped living it for someone else. At first, the silence from Claire and Daniel was heavy, almost physical. No calls, no messages, no sudden requests disguised as casual conversations. Just absence. The kind that used to scare me. The kind that once would have set me reaching for the phone, ready to apologize for something I hadn't done, just to restore the illusion of peace. But this time, I let it remain. I let the silence exist without trying to fix it. And something unexpected happened. It stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling like space. I began to notice things I hadn't paid attention to in years. The way morning light moved across my kitchen table. The quiet satisfaction of drinking coffee without interruption. The simple, almost forgotten pleasure of making plans that didn't revolve around someone else's needs. At first, it felt unfamiliar, even slightly uncomfortable, like wearing a new pair of shoes that hadn't quite softened yet. But slowly, it became natural. One of the first things I did was return to something I had loved long before life became complicated: gardening. My backyard had always been my refuge, but over the past few years, it had turned into something I maintained out of habit rather than joy. That changed. I started spending hours outside again, digging, planting, planning. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was something deeply grounding about it. The patience it required, the care, the quiet reward of seeing something grow because you gave it attention. Through that, I found myself drawn into a local community gardening group. It wasn't something I had planned. I saw a small notice at the library one afternoon and decided, almost impulsively, to attend a meeting. I expected it to be mildly interesting at best. Instead, it became one of the most important decisions I had made in years. The group was small, welcoming, and refreshingly uncomplicated. People talked about soil, weather, plants, not about status or expectations or what someone could provide. No one needed anything from me except participation. And for the first time in a long while, that felt honest. That's where I met Thomas. He wasn't remarkable in the way people like Daniel were. No polished charm, no carefully curated confidence. But he had something far more rare: sincerity. He listened when people spoke. He laughed easily. He didn't try to impress anyone. And when he spoke to me, it wasn't with polite tolerance or hidden expectation. It was genuine. We started with small conversations, about plants mostly, then books, then music, then life. It happened gradually, without pressure, without definition. Just two people sharing time without needing anything more. One afternoon, as we worked side by side planting herbs along the edge of the garden, he glanced at me and said, "You seem different from when I first met you." I smiled slightly. "In what way?" "Lighter," he said. "Like you're not carrying something you used to." I thought about that. He wasn't wrong. "I stopped carrying things that weren't mine," I said. He nodded, as if that made perfect sense. And it did. At home, things had settled into a new kind of normal. The financial pressure I hadn't fully acknowledged before was gone. My savings, once steadily shrinking, were stabilizing again. Margaret and I had adjusted my long-term plan, and for the first time in years, it felt secure. Not limitless, not extravagant, but stable.
Meaning?
I had also taken her advice and met with an attorney. The process of organizing my affairs, updating documents, establishing boundaries on paper as well as in life, was strangely empowering. It wasn't about expecting the worst. It was about removing the possibility of being placed in that position again. Ethan became more present during those months, not out of obligation, but choice. He visited more often, sometimes bringing his daughter, Lily. She would run through my garden, asking endless questions, touching everything, fascinated by the smallest details. Watching her, I was reminded of Claire at that age, curious, bright, full of wonder before life complicated things. My relationship with Claire didn't disappear, but it changed. We spoke occasionally. Short conversations at first, cautious, almost formal. Over time, they softened slightly, though something fundamental remained different. She no longer asked for money. Not once. Whether that was because she understood or simply accepted that the answer would always be no, I didn't know. I learned, slowly, to accept that too. Not everything needs to be repaired to be real. One afternoon, several months after that dinner, she called unexpectedly. "Mom," she said, her voice quieter than I remembered. "I just wanted to check in." We talked for a few minutes. Nothing dramatic. Nothing confrontational. Just conversation. Before hanging up, she paused.
"We're moving," she said.
"Oh," I asked. "A smaller place," she admitted. "Something more manageable." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "That sounds like a good decision." There was a brief silence. Then, softer. "It probably should have happened sooner." "Yes," I said. "Probably." She didn't argue. And that, more than anything, told me everything had changed. After the call, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt at peace. Because this was never about winning. It was about ending something that was never meant to continue. That evening, I met Thomas at a small outdoor concert in the park. Nothing elaborate. Just music, warm air, and people enjoying the moment. We sat side by side, not speaking much, just listening. At one point, he reached for my hand, not cautiously, not questioningly, just naturally. And I let him, not because I needed someone, but because I wanted to share something. There's a difference. As the music played and the sky slowly darkened, I thought about that night at the restaurant. The spotlight, the laughter, the moment that once felt like humiliation. Now it felt like something else entirely. A turning point. A moment that forced me to see clearly what I had been unwilling to see. That my value was not defined by what I gave. That love without respect is not love at all. That boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. At 64, I had not lost anything that mattered. I had found something far more important. Myself. And as I walked home later that night, hand in hand with someone who saw me, not as a resource, not as an obligation, but as a person, I realized something simple and undeniable. I wasn't starting over. I was finally living the life that had been waiting for me all along.